What's up, everybody? We're back. Another episode. This Life Ain't For Everybody. Hopefully y'all are enjoying them. From the readings of the direct messages and all of our inquiries, y'all are loving the diversity in guests. We got a lot of great episodes coming your way. Today's episode is no different. I'm fired up for it. It's brought to you again by the one and only, the iconic Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey, Jack Daniels. Enjoy it responsibly. Never, ever allow underage drinking. Thank you, Jack Daniels, for bringing so much to all of our lives and for supporting the culture of what we stand for here at all of our brands. I've seen my guest today in concert many, many times. He plays in one of my favorite bands for one of my favorite artists of all times. And I got to know him over the last several years just through concerts and hanging out and shaking his hand. And then I got into his music, and it is freaking rad. And I'm going to start this off after I introduce Chris Hennessee. I mean, you're in the Jamey Johnson band. You're a solo artist. You're a songwriter. You've had a lot of songs recorded by several artists that we all know. How are you today, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Right off the bat, you're starting with Jack Daniels. That's my neck of the woods, man. That's where I'm from. So,
well, we need to get together the next time I'm in Lynchburg.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a show there with Jamey. Matter of fact, about 2 years ago, I guess, right there in Lynchburg at the distillery. It's really cool.
Were you at Barbecue Hill up on top?
No, it was down in the valley where we were playing. I
got to ask you. I was at the lake this last weekend, and this song that you've had out for a while, gospel songs. Even if you're not religious and you're spiritual, and even if you don't want to discuss religion, you know, like I'm sure you know Sammy Kershaw, and he made the line, "You never talk about politics, religion, and her." I know that you come from an area where you're a God-fearing man. Is this a safe assumption to make? And if it is, Chris, how does this song come about? Because when I heard it, I had to rewind it 3 times, and it shakes me every time. Do you hear that a lot from people about that particular song?
As a matter of fact, I do. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it crosses line. You know, you don't have to be a Southern Baptist to get that song. You know, you can listen to the lyrics and be like, yeah, that makes sense. You asked me about, you know, willing to speak about it. Absolutely. I am more than willing to speak about it. You know, say the name of Jesus. I've got no problem with that. Matter of fact, I feel like it's a job. You know, I want to do it. I look forward to doing it. But yeah, absolutely. That song, I get a lot of feedback from that. Well, I think we got a robber.
What I was thinking about when I was listening to it, and I kind of want to get your answer to this on all of the stuff that you put out, because it's no secret that you work and play and make a part of your livelihood in the Jamey Johnson band. You're great friends with Jamey Johnson. I've said it on this podcast many, many times that the Lonesome Song is the best all around country album of all time, in my opinion, song for song. I love Merle. I love all the Outlaws. I love a lot of albums, but the Lonesome Song just hits me different. Here we are. I don't even know how many years later, but at least a decade, 15 years. And every song is still freaking amazing. I talked to Jeremy Popoff about Mowing Down the Roses and the genius behind that song. And then he's like, well, that song, we wrote that in like 12 minutes. And I'm just like, wow. But tell me, Chris Hennessee, do you run to Jamey and get his opinion on a song like gospel songs? Do you look forward to hearing what somebody like of his, you know, because he can write a song and he can deliver a song, and he is a great choreographer, in my opinion, of your guys' band. And I know you help him out a lot on that front. But how much does his opinion matter to Chris Hennessee? And do you go to him with a song like that and just wait there, standing on, you know, just like being like, can't wait for his response?
That's a great question. If you ask, let's put it like this: if you ask him that question about his music, he would say, "No, I'm not concerned about. You know, I hope you like it, but I'm not concerned about your response." If that makes sense. So, in that sense, of course, I want somebody like Jamey to like and respect the stuff that I do. Absolutely. You know, he would be way up on the top of the list. I've always thought that. You know, I've always thought if I could look down the road at my career and I can have people that I respecting my music, then I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, you know. But when it comes to making records, you know, there was a day probably many years ago that I would have really went out and seeked approval and seeked, you know, opinions of people about my music. And, of course, I want you and I want everybody to like what I'm putting out in the world. But at the same time, you just got to do your thing, you know. And when it's done and you play it for people, of course, you hope that they like it and respect it. But it doesn't really play a factor into whether I record the song or don't record it or put it on the record or don't put it on the record. But now, as you probably know, Jamey's also kind of a tough one to pin down. You know, it's kind of hard to find a moment to say, hey, I want to play you a song, you know. But as we move along, he ends up hearing them. And I will say this, my old buddy, he's pretty picky. I am too, you know, kind of picky about the music that you like and listen to on a regular basis. So if he mentions, hey, I like this song, it really resonates, you know, it really makes a difference. So
did he ever say that about gospel songs?
I don't think we've ever talked about gospel songs. Now, a lot of that might have to do with the fact that my buddy, I don't know if I ever told you the story about it. We're mutual friends with a guy named Blake Harris. We call him Wally.
Oh, yeah.
And my brother Wally, he helps out with Jamey's camp. And we were on the bus, and actually Wally wasn't there. He called, and we were talking about there was a shooting that happened, one of those ridiculous things that happened a few years ago. And he said, this world could use a few more gospel songs. And I don't know why that simple thing that he said hit me at that moment. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I ran to the back of the bus, and like 10 minutes later, I wrote this song and came out and played it, you know, and then we recorded it. And so the reason I say that is to say that there's a good chance Wally has played that song for Jamey 20 times. So he would probably be the better person to ask about that.
Does our mutual buddy Wally, and I love him to death, does he get a co-writer credit for saying that to you that day before you went back and pinned it?
He does. And the reason is because I love him, and that's the way it ought to be. And if, you know, I've hung around Music Row long enough to know that, you know, character is a big deal. And, you know, you might hear somebody say something and be like, I'm going to sneak over here and write this down. But it always ends up working out better in the long run if you just give credit where it's due, you know. So, yeah, Wally's got a writer credit on it. And he also has writer credit on, as you probably know, Jennings and Jones.
I know.
Somewhere. Yeah, that's a great story right there. So. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be at Graceland for Randy and Jamey in April, and I was standing backstage with Wally, and he told me that again. I'm just like, man, just what a great feeling it must be, because that song's very clever in my opinion, of picturing a record shop and knowing that Jamey's initials fall in between Waylon Jennings and George Jones, two of the greatest of all time in most opinion, including mine. Very clever song. So when you start talking about giving credit where credit is due, Chris Hennessee, when it comes to your career, you're playing in what could be the most respected. I don't know how to say this without maybe having somebody go, you're nuts, man, you're out of your mind. But there's something about your guys' band and your sound that has resonated through the community of musicians. And where I'm going with this is, it seems to me that you and Jamey and the entire crew, from Herb Hassey to Wally to you got this Willie Nelson cult following feel to you. But more so than that, Chris, is that it seems like everybody has such huge respect, meaning that CDB, George Jones tribute, Randy Travis, the Willie tribute. I could keep going on and on. The George Strait, when Jamey got up and did Give It Away that he wrote and George made a hit. It just seems like there is so much respect. Even the band you just got off the road with last night, Whiskey Myers, Cody Cannon, the guys, they are an unbelievable outfit of music. And then when I was on with Cody Jinks, I said, is Jamey Johnson the best of all time? And he scooted up to his camera and he said, hell yes, he is. So my point, Chris Hennessee, is you being so close to it, why is it that everybody, Jamey's not on the radio much. He doesn't seems to be playing the Nashville role anymore. Hasn't for a long time. that was his decision, I believe. I don't know the whole story, but it just seems like you guys have this respect where you are like building this legacy where you guys are welcomed in by all of the who's who in country music. Does this question make sense? I kind of feel like I'm bouncing around too much, but I'm trying to say that you guys are on stage where it matters the most, and it doesn't matter if you have a number one hit on the radio or not. Yeah.
So I think if I can kind of figure out the best way to answer the question, I don't know if you're saying, do we notice it or not? Like,
what brings it? Why does Chris Hennessee and Jamey Johnson get asked, come play CDB, come play George Jones, come out on the road with Willie, play, you're in Farm Aid, you're at the picnic. You guys are doing all of the most, this is the most important stuff in music, in my opinion. And it seems like you guys are always a part of it and welcomed in by all of the who's who in music.
Right. So I think it really, to answer that properly, I think you'd have to go back to Jamey's, to the beginning of his career and the way that he handled it. He had a record deal at RCA, the record that the Dollar was on, and that didn't work out. And then so he just took the ball in his own hands, ran with it. And not too many artists do that. Made his own record, delivered it to Luke Lewis, who was very influential and important part, I think, of his career. Because Luke said, yeah, he saw, like you did, he heard the record and goes, we really got something here, And I think you have to chase it back to there. And then the roots of Jamey are different than most other country artists in modern times, because he did literally and sincerely do it his way. Those records that he made were records that he put the sessions together and did it himself, So I think just right off the bat, and then the word gets out, and you got the people like, Randy Travis and Charlie Daniels and et cetera, Willie especially, that know these things. And he also kind of exudes it too. You've been around him a lot, so you know that he wears it, where a lot of artists now don't necessarily do that. And I'll also say this too. One of the reasons that his music is continually growing, even though it has been a while since he's made a record, is because he's country music by definition, and country music by definition in the last 10 years has changed so dramatically. And I feel like there are a lot of people who love country music but don't necessarily love what they're hearing on country radio today, so they gravitate more and more towards Jamey and Cody Jinks and Whiskey Myers and all the folks we were talking about earlier. But, and you got to remember, too, like I said, you've been around him, and, my buddy demands respect. There's a lot to be said for that. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
It totally does. It just seems like being in your shoes, you are, I don't know if this is going to sound right, and tell me if it doesn't. And I would never, ever disrespect you in any way, but you're kind of like Mickey and the harmonica of Willie, to where you're standing on stage with Jamey and you are as talented as they come, but you're like experiencing things that are coming through that respect. I think that people want you guys there, because I think that it comes down to this. There's a dedication to the music and the lyric and the song. And that's all that I can think of. I know Jamey's a stand-up guy. I know how he feels about the military and our first responders, and I know how you do as well. So I just think that there's this respect there that is like real. It's authentic and it's legitimate, so legitimate, because you guys put the lyric and the song out front, and you pay homage to the people that came before you, and you show them the same respect that Jamey and you demand. So I don't know if that question really made sense. It just seems like when I look at it, it's like, wow, Jamey's on this bill. Chris and Jamey are over here doing this. They're here. Yeah. And you don't get invited to these things just because you have a number one hit on the radio. You guys have this thing going on that's like, you have a vibe that's just so authentic. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's about authenticity. I agree 100%. It's about, I think a lot of times, especially in music, you can tell when somebody's trying to play by the playbook, and that's not something that we've ever done. And I will say this too, you're talking about like Mickey and being on stage with Jamey and that kind of stuff. I really feel indebted, and I feel not obligated, but I really do feel a debt of gratitude to Jamey because, you know, I really pulled it out through the years on Music Row, and that's how we met. You know, we met in, I think it was like 2000 we met, and we were doing the same stuff, songwriting and just beating our head against the wall, trying to figure out how to make something stick, you know. And fortunately, he got going early on, and rightfully so, obviously. I mean, talent speaks for itself. That voice does, you know. So, and then I had a real hard time catching any traction. And frankly, if it wasn't for Jamey, you know, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this stuff right now, because he is, you know, like I said, I really owe a lot to him. I've been able to make records through the years and really, you know, in the last decade, and really work because of him. So, yeah, I got to really tip my hat to my old bearded buddy.
Chris, does it, as far as ego and pride in the human psyche and in our brain, and it happens to all of us, sometimes it gets in the way. Hopefully we mature in life sooner than later, to where we see the importance and what should be important, like you've said. And I could probably write down the things that are important to Chris Hennessee without asking out loud right now. But I bet family is for number one. I bet friends are there. I bet the man upstairs and the Lord above is very high on your list. I think that your dedication to your craft is very high on your list. I'm assuming these things about you based on the way that I watch you play, the way that I present you, or the way that I see you present yourself, how nice you are to us and our crew when we're around. Did ego ever affect Chris Hennessee in a way of, like, you just made mention that you saw Jamey take off and you're back here on Music Row trying to get a piece of the cake or a piece of the pie, as they would say, like George Jefferson talked about moving on up.
Yeah.
Does it ever bring you down that it didn't happen in the way that you thought it would when you did move to 16th and 17th Avenue and started trying to work your way up? And I know that you've achieved so much, but has it ever affected you? Do you ever get down? Do you ever say, why didn't it take off? Or do you just be like, are you so mature in your thinking, Chris Hennessee, that you're like, you know what? The man upstairs had a plan. I'm supposed to be standing on the stage with Jamey Johnson and making my records when I see fit and writing my songs when I see fit. And you're happy as heck to be doing that.
Now that is an excellent question, and one that I will be happy to answer. And I appreciate it, because it gives me a chance to really, you know, I can dig deep on that one. If you were to ask me that question 12 years ago, I would have maybe lied and said, oh, no, man, you know, it's great. Everything's great, you know, but it hurt. But I tell you what, I can pinpoint a moment, and I will never forget it. I was sitting in the front of the tour bus in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, pulling down the road. Jamey was sitting there and I was sitting there. Crowd everywhere. We're pulling in, and we're doing a show with Merle Haggard. And I'm pretty sure it was Merle and Willie. So we were playing, and then Merle and Willie. And I remember looking out at that crowd, and I remember, you know, thinking, you have a choice. And this was quite a few years ago. You know, this is quite a few years ago. You have a choice in how you want to handle these kind of situations. Do you want to go, man, I should be playing on this show. I should be, you know, it should be Chris Hennessee, Jamey Johnson, Merle Haggard, Will, you know. And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks right there in that moment. Like, man, thank goodness I'm here. You know, like, thank God he's put me in an opportunity to be with a guy like Jamey, playing with Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard, and rolling down through here in a tour bus when, you know, a year earlier I'm in a Suburban pulling a trailer trying to go find somewhere to, you know, make enough money to pay for gas to get back home, you know. So I feel like I don't know about the upper level artists, but, you know, I feel like for people like me, you have a choice. You can either look at it negative, you can look at it positive. You can look at it like I had a dream and I had a goal and I didn't reach it and I'm bitter and I'm mad. Or the way I choose to look at it is, man, I just did a show with Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and the new dude that's just as big as they are, you know. And it just makes you, it takes a load off of you, and you know, then God comes into the picture and goes, okay, you're getting it. You're slowly getting it. Out of 100%, you're 1.5% the way there. Congratulations. You know what I mean? So that's a great question. I appreciate you saying that, because I have been humbled and blessed all at the same time. And I feel like the reason the blessing happens is because of the humility. If that makes sense.
100% makes sense. And I appreciate the clarity and the transparency in the answer. What if it happened today, though, Chris Hennessee? What if your loyalty and your love for your music right now and one of your great friends, Jamey Johnson, was put into a decision to where Music Row did come calling, said, hey, it's your time. But just like Aaron Lewis and George Jones talked about and Country Boy about, they might try to call the shots. Jamey didn't play by those rules. Do you see yourself saying, you know what, Jamey, I got to have a talk with you? Do you think you could ever do that, Chris Hennessee, with what has transformed over the last almost 2 decades in your career with Jamey Johnson? Could you go play by the rules now and start a solo career if they said you can't be in that band anymore? This is your show now. You got to roll. What would happen then? So,
and if Jamey was here, he would say this too. First of all, if it was Music Row and they said, hey, we're giving you a shot, you got your chance. I'm not interested. I don't really need it. I'm very pleased and happy with where my solo career is at this point. I mean, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've, done a lot of shows, done a lot of stuff myself, but I'm also doing a lot of opening slots for Jamey and that kind of thing too. But what I was going to say is that the conversation with Jamey would be like this: man, I hate to say it, but I've got a really great opportunity to go out and do a solo artist thing. And he'd probably give me a pretty good tongue lashing if I didn't just go do it. You know what I mean? Like early on in my I guess tenure with him, of course, we've been friends for 20 years, but I've been working with him for probably a decade or more. And right from the start, he's like, man, let's build this thing up and, you take off and do your thing. So I'm sure, definitely the blessing would be there on that end. But that's what I'm doing anyways. Frankly, to be honest with you, I wouldn't change anything right now. It's great. We're doing, we're working our butt off. I'm making records, and I'm doing them the way I want to do them. I'm doing them myself, and I don't have anybody to answer to, just the fans, so it's great.
When I get to meet somebody that had played with Merle or was on stage with Randy Travis before the accident, or you talk to, like, I got to sit and talk with Paul English at one time when playing my local area. I often think about the questions that could have been asked, and I'm sure you and Jamey have this kind of love and influence and inspiration from guys like, what would it have been like to stand behind Elvis? Like Hank Williams Jr. gets up on stage and he tells these stories, Chris Hennessee, about, man, when I was 8 years old, I'd walk in the house and little Richard was on the couch and Waylon was over here. And could you imagine? But now look at Chris Hennessee. It's happening to you. You're a young man that has literally been around all of these guys, being so good yourself and so talented. Does anything surprise you anymore? When Jamey hits that first line of that Lonesome Song, do you still have the hair standing up on your arms when you're trying to pick the guitar? Do you ever get choked up anymore? Does anything ever impress you anymore? Because you've been around the greatest of the great when it comes to what you do, and you're right there playing alongside of them. Does anything ever blow your mind when you're out on the road anymore?
Oh, where to start? I can tell you all kinds of stories that were hair raising for me. just in the last few years, but thankfully now things don't get me so worked up that it's hard to perform. You know what I mean? There was a time that would have been the case if I looked over. Well, matter of fact, okay, I'll give you an example. The first gig that I did with Jamey, I was playing harmonica, and we were doing Farm Aid in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and we're walking to the stage. And I'll be honest with you, especially back then, that was 10 years ago or more. I was novice harmonica player. I've improved a bit, but I'm still no Mickey, you know what I mean? And we're walking to the stage, and we're walking with Willie's road manager, and he says, hey, there's Mickey. You want to go meet him? And I was like, no, man, not right now. we're walking on stage about to play in front of, Farm Aid crowd. And this is my first go around. And he's like, oh, come on. So we go over, I meet Mickey, and I'm like, okay, good. We met him. We're good. And I play harmonica sort of. So we go on stage and we're doing an old Patsy Cline cover. And he looks at me like solo. And I'm like, all right. And about the time I start the solo, I look over and there's Mickey on the stage right. And I just tell myself, okay, don't look over there. Just look over here. And look to the left. There's Neil Young. So I was just like, oh, well, what am I going to do, man? I just ripped into it. And it's great. Jamey's really good about that, too, because he kind of frees you up to just be like, go for it. If you fall flat on your face, you better, do it while you're going for it. Don't ease into it,
God,
so let's go back to your original question. It seems like weekly we're doing something that I'm like, man, I can't believe we just did that, or we just met them. I mean, 2 years ago, I guess, before all the COVID stuff, we were doing the Leonard Skinner tour. And this goes back to the earlier question that you were asking about, humility and that kind of stuff. If the 18-year-old me knew that the me now was going to be doing a show with Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker Band, and Charlie Daniels, I would have lost my mind, But there we were, and I got to meet Charlie and kind of hang out with him, and of course, the Skinner guys. I'm buddies with 2 or 3 of those guys too, and it's mind blowing to me. And I always think teenage me. I always go back to teenage me and just be like, man, he would be like, I can't believe you're doing it.
Well, I don't think anybody could. I mean, it's just like, I don't get envious of it because I'm not a musician, but dang it, I would love to be able to look back on a career like you're going to be able to do and be like, I did it. Like I was there with all of these people, not to mention that you're putting out unreal music and you're the front man for one of the, you're with Jamey right now, like who, again, I'd say it with pride that I think he's got the best voice and has put out one of the best albums, if not the best album of all time.
Hey, you know what I'm talking about, because I think I read somewhere a long time ago, I can't remember what it was in. You were talking about George Brett, and so you grow up like me. I'm a baseball guy. I grew up playing and played in high school and college, and they're dudes that, if I met, I would just be like, I can't believe this. But there you are, like, right? You met George Brett, right?
Well, yeah, it was because of hunting, and I got invited to say hello to him, and he wanted to say hi to me, and he takes his phone out and he's like, let me show you these hunting pictures. And he takes me into his office, and from then on, he's like, take my number. Now I get to go in his backyard and cook steaks with him, and I get to sit in his box at Kaufman Stand. And I'm just like, is this real? I used to drive 3.5, 4 hours to Oakland, California, in the Bay Area to watch the Royals play the Oakland Athletics because the A's and the Giants were the closest Major League Baseball teams to where I grew up. And I'd just sit there in awe of number 5. And then at that time, Bo Jackson was there and Brett Saberhagen and all these. And now I'm sitting with George Brett going, what the heck's going on, man? What the heck is going on?
It's nuts, man. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's the same deal. It's crazy.
When you said, Willie's tour manager at the time, was that Pootie that walked you up to, was it Pootie at the time?
No, John Selman. It was the newer guy, John.
John's, yeah, I love John. He's awesome.
I never got to meet Pootie. He was gone before I started running around and meeting those guys. But man, hanging with Willie, yeah, I could talk to you for a while about that too. That's pretty cool.
Well, let's talk about a question about Willie. What do you think has been the main reason, if you had to put your finger on it? Is it his dedication to the song, or is he a sweetheart of a human being? What has built this allegiance to Willie from all artists? I mean, all artists. From Snoop Dogg to Blink 182 to Miranda Lambert to Jamey Johnson and Chris Hennessee. I mean, you name it. Willie Nelson's been a part of something with all of these. He's been on the Howard Stern show like 10 times. What is it about him, you knowing him, that sets him apart, that's made him legendary?
Well, I mean, you could answer that for an hour, but I think if you had to put it into short form, I would answer it kind of like I did Jamey. You can go back to his early work. I think it was 1973 or 4, and he did the Red-Headed Stranger album, and that was out of nowhere, you can go back and listen to other country albums from that era, and that did not fit into the format. And I think that's the beginnings of it. That explains, his personality. But then when you get around Willie and you meet him, you realize, man, he's the same dude sitting there playing cards as he is when he's on the Howard Stern or whatever big show, or the presidential honors or whatever it might be. He's the same guy, and he's just dry. He's just, I don't know. I guess if I really think about it, Willie reminds me of, they've taken a time machine and went back and got a mid 1800s cowboy and just threw him right into modern times. That's kind of the way it feels. And I think that's probably what the draw is to him too, is just his personality,
I love
short.
Yeah, it's got to be something, because I've been around Willie, and I got to run with Pootie back in the day a little bit, and then got to meet Lucas, and just such sweet people, but so talented. Like watching Lucas on stage, bro. Like, is he not amazing? Like his talent level is like, I know he grew up around it. It has to have something to do with it, but he's taking it to the next level. And would you consider him and Willie great guitar players?
Yeah. So if I just had Lucas's energy to begin with, that would be a step in the right direction. But man, Willie's guitar playing, the older I get, the more I pay attention to it, it's extremely impressive. It really is. I think he's one of the best ever, and it's a stylistic thing. He's you can't really compare him and Jimi Hendrix, but in the sense of being in that style, like he's as good. And two, we were talking about guitar playing and Willie. I mean, how many people could you hear 3 notes on one guitar with nothing else playing and say, "Oh, I know who that is"? I mean, I can't name maybe 2 other people than him that you could say that about. So that says a lot.
And to be able to bring those notes out of that guitar for so many years. When you look at that guitar, you're like, man, if that guitar could talk, man, it's that deal has seen some stuff. When you start thinking about your career now, Hennessee, where you're going with the 2 songs that you've released so far, Twilight in the South, what is it about the pride of the South? And what I mean by this is, I'm prideful from where I come from. I would never say like, oh, I can't stand this place. I like it. It's built me. My mom and dad were here. We're 3rd generation. But there's something different about where you're from. I've coined myself the adopted son of the South, because I love it there. I am lucky enough to be able to go down there and hunt and cook and meet people and become part of their kin almost. People say things different in the South. Things happen different in the South. I'm not saying that the South is perfect, and I'm not trying to build up, but there's something about the South, the southern part of the United States. And I would say it maybe East Texas to Georgia, northern Florida a little bit. You're going to have to tell me what you consider the South. South Carolina, North Carolina, but for sure parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, East Tennessee. And then you got Kentucky. There's something different about that place. Twilight in the South. Why do you have so much pride in the South? Because when I hear the words in this song, I think about you writing it and you sitting there going, man, this is a pretty freaking cool place to grow up, a pretty cool place to live. What is it about the South, Chris Hennessee, that exudes this much pride?
Well, I think, and I've noticed this too, because I've played that song now in Michigan, and I've played it in, we were just in Montana and Wyoming and South Dakota, and I'm looking out at the crowd, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, this the same thing here. Just, it just depends on what kind of people we're talking about, where they live, but for me personally, the reason that it's so, that I feel such an intense endearment to the Southeast is because that's where I'm from. That this goes back to childhood memories and things that I hold near and dear, which can happen anywhere. Like you said, where you're at. I mean, man, where you're at is absolutely beautiful. There's things that go on there and that you can see there you can't even think about seeing here. But I grew up in East Tennessee, so that's what I'm used to. That's what I'm accustomed to. But it is different. I will give you that. I think I think the people are different. You know, everybody's got their pluses and minuses, but I just personally love good old Southern folk. And like you said, maybe it's just dialect more than anything. I don't really know. But I know that it's dear to me just because it's where I'm from. You know, I grew up in East Tennessee. And if you listen to that song, I'm telling you, every little tidbit of that song, I have an image in my head from when I was growing up I see that thing in every second of that song that I'm singing. And it talks about where Tennessee turns into Alabama. That's right down where I grew up, you know, and the Chickamauga Dam is just right below. I grew up on the Chickamauga Lake, basically, in Watts Bar Lake. So it's all very, you know, near and dear to me. So, and that time of day too. I mean, even today, I promise you, the sun will be setting and I'll be sitting outside and hearing the sounds and smelling the smells and being like, man, this is where it's at. You know, it's great.
What are some of the detailed favorites or memories? What would you have to what if I said, Chris, you have to choose one last Southern meal to eat? What would it be?
Man, that's a good question. Well, and I may be answering this the way I'm going to answer because it's the time of year that it is. But if I could be at my granny's house on Sunday afternoon, and she would have tomato out of the garden, she'd have fried okra, not deep fried, pan fried, you know, crispy okra, a squash casserole, mashed potatoes, to make sure I'm not leaving. And she made rolls that were pretty intense too. There you go. That's the answer. That would be it right there. I can taste it and smell it right now. So that's it. Now, if you ask me in the winter, it might be different. I don't know, but that's what it is right now.
When you said the tomatoes, did you have anybody in your family? I have a friend that's from Mississippi that now lives in Nashville. His name's Leith Lofton. He's been to a lot of your shows with me. You know, Leith. His mom makes what they call, and we don't have it out here. We have spaghetti sauce and we have ragu and stuff like this, but they make something in the South called tomato gravy that they put on biscuits. And does anybody in your family make what they call tomato gravy? Because when you said that, I thought you were going to say, oh, my grandma would make a tomato gravy with it. Leith Lofton's mom makes this tomato gravy, Chris Hennessee, that literally blows my mind. And Leith can do it, but he can't, and self-admittedly, he can't quite get it like Mama can.
Now, he's from Alabama, isn't that right?
No, he's from Mississippi.
Mississippi. Yeah,
Drake White's from Alabama.
Yeah, I just talked to Drake earlier. He said to tell you hello, by the way.
Awesome.
But, no, to answer your question, and I think when you do get into the Southeast like this, they'll do something a little different in Mississippi than they do in Tennessee, than they do in Alabama. So we had what we call black-eye gravy or red-eye gravy, which is ham, you know, just ham gravy, but I never did have any of that stuff. No.
Do you like a good fish fry, Chris Hennessee?
Who in the world does not like a good fish fry? I mean,
okay, so is it crappie every time where you're from, or do you do the catfish too?
I mean, I would say as I was growing up, if I had to say, it was probably more catfish than crappie, just because, you know, you catch catfish all year. Well, you can catch crappie all year round too, but really get into a mess of crappie in the early spring, you know. But catfish fry was pretty often happening around. It still is. So
you're growing up in the South. You're an athlete. When does the influence of music take part? Is it, I would guess, if I had to guess and bet money, would be, I think a bear just crawled through.
It was a raccoon.
What? Was it in church that got you into music? Because you hear that a lot in the South of being in the church and doing and being around the gospel songs like we started this conversation with. Did that influence you, or was it the Lynyrd Skynyrd's and the Almonds and some of the music that was happening at that time in this? You know, Elvis, who's considered the king of rock and roll, is from Mississippi as well, and he grew, and then Graceland is in Memphis, correct? So there's a lot of influence in the part of the country that you're from. How does it happen to where you decide, I'm going to start playing the guitar or the harmonica or the piano?
Well, I'm sure everybody has a different story on the influence, but it started in church for me. My granny I can still remember her like hitting me in the ribs and going, "Sing out! If you're gonna sing, sing louder." But gospel music, in the church was the first live music that I heard and participated in. When I was growing up, if you went into just random store, to do shopping or whatever, there's going to be some country music playing in the background. Johnny Paycheck, and back then it probably would have been like Eddie Rabbitt and Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and that stuff all over the radio. So country music was just part of the fabric. If you're sitting in a restaurant, you're hearing it, and you're in somebody's truck, you're hearing it. But I can honestly say, I won't say I remember the first time that I heard Leonard Skinner or Sweet Home Alabama, but I can tell you the first time that I heard it and was like, okay, that's it. And I was probably 13 years old. And we used to my dad had an old truck, and we'd go down to Daytona every year. And sometimes we'd go to the race and then stay at the beach, for a while. And he put a camper top on the back of that truck. Me and my buddy would just ride in the back of the truck all the way down to the beach and back. And we had a little jam box we'd put batteries in. We'd listen. And man, it was driving down there, and you're all excited to go to the beach, and you got to go through the radio stations because they go in and out. And man, all of a sudden, Sweet Home Alabama started, and I think we might have, we're probably going through Georgia, but we were down in that neck of the woods. And man, I turned that thing up, and it just spoke to me so hard in that moment. And I was just getting into guitar and stuff, and that's the first song. So when I got back home, I got my buddy that knew how to play to show me how to play a D chord and just do those first three notes, and that was it. I was hooked at that point and got into Southern rock really heavy. So I think through high school, that was between them and Hank Jr. and oh man, Kentucky Headhunters. I just love, and I still do. God, I love those guys. But that's where it really, once that guitar started, that's when it really kicked in and got, I got really invested and interested in it. But yeah, it all rooted back to the gospel stuff. So.
I think we're kind of close to the same age. I don't know. Jamey and I are about the same exact age. I know it was just his birthday. Are you younger than Jamey?
I'm 24. How old are you?
I just turned 24, 23, somewhere right in there. Well,
I got you by a couple of years. I think I got you by a couple of years.
Did you transition at all into the hair bands and the 80s rock and the Quiet Riots and the Judas Priest and the Rodney James Dio? Because like when I was talking to Charlie Starr one time, I was talking about my fascination with, it was Dee Snider and Twisted Sister and that whole band. It was Rodney James Dio. And then in like 86, 87, I became fascinated, and I still am today with Guns N' Roses. And I think Axl is an insane frontman and but anyway, did you have that love of that type of music too? Like I did back then?
Yeah, there was no way to avoid it. I mean, when we were that age, like that was pop music. That was the biggest music that was out there. So, and it was made for us. I mean, we were teenagers, so you're going to dig it, so absolutely. I remember definitely the first time I heard like Welcome to the Jungle, and I was like, okay, this is different. And I mean, it hit me pretty well. All of our age folks, it hit pretty hard. But there was also some stuff that I was interested in back then that I'm not sure I would admit to right now. But
Depeche Mode? Tears for Fears.
Well, I know a little bit. Well, I'm not. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it.
Hey, I listened to George Michael, You Gotta Have Faith. I listened to Men at Work. I listened to all this stuff.
That was great stuff, man. How could you not listen?
Oh, I love George Michael, man. God, was he good.
Okay, I got a question for you. Your most guilty pleasure band. Come on. I mean,
of all time?
Yeah.
I would probably, it's crazy to think this because I'm a huge lover of what I call, it's called boat music or yacht music, I guess they call it on Pandora. But I love How Deep Is Your Love by the Bee Gees. When I hear like that kind of song, like you would look at me and what I do for a living and you probably would be like, no, man, you're not listening to How Deep Is Your Love. But when it comes on at the lake, Chris Hennessee, my guilty pleasure is these two songs, Bee Gees, How Deep Is Your Love, and 1979 Billboard #1 hit, Flash in the Pants, one hit wonder, Rupert Holmes, If You Like Pina Colada. When I hear that, that's my guilty pleasure.
Okay, you got, now this is not my #1. I'd have to think about it for a little while, but you remember Reminiscing? It was Little River Band.
Oh, I love Little River Band.
And the Dark and Reminisce. Oh, that one gets me every time.
I listened to Little River Band last night on a deck at this lake in the mountains of California, and my buddy Jason Carrier was singing every word to it. I'm like, I'm getting a bunch of their stuff, but man, great band. America came on. I went through the desert on a horse with no... I mean, there was some good stuff playing last night.
Oh, man, that is some good stuff, yeah.
When earlier in the conversation, Chris Hennessee, you said that maybe we are going to gravitate towards you guys' sound because we're not necessarily happy with what's being played on quote unquote country music. I've been accused on this podcast, Chris, about saying that I don't think that there's a lot of real country music on the radio. Now, everybody deserves to make a living, and what Brent Cobb, which I consider one of the best songwriters of today, in my opinion. Do you agree?
If he's not in the top 2 or 3, then I'm missing something. He's amazing.
God, you're unreal for saying that. He's amazing to me. And he educated me on this podcast one time, Chris, and said, Chad, country music is going to do what country music's going to do, and you're just going to have to deal with it. So he's pretty much telling me that, hey, if I never make it on the radio, because my whole deal is that we deserve to hear Shine On Rainy Day, okay? The world deserves to hear Twilight in the South. But when you turn on country music, you're not going to hear that being spun right now. Now, you can go find it with streaming. I'm not saying you can't, but what I am talking about is what is country music. And there was a time in, like, I would say around 86, 87, 88, 89 when George Strait was on it. And then here comes Travis Tritt, another fellow, you know, from the South and Southeast. He just did this podcast, huge talent. Then you had Mark Chestnut and you had Tracy Lawrence and you had this music there that kind of formed in. And then Garth kind of came out of that age. Country music was pretty freaking rad. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you, Chris Hennessee, to tell me, are you dissatisfied with what is out there today? But do you have any that you do enjoy? Now, Chris Stapleton cannot be mentioned in this conversation because Chris is badass and we know this, okay? He was Steel Drivers. He's been in Nashville a long time, comes out with what are you listening to, doesn't quite make it. Then The Traveler hits. Then he's on stage with Justin Timberlake. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, who in the heck is this guy? I love him. But he's not normal for today's music. Do you like anybody else that's out there?
Yeah, I do. And actually, and I promise this is not because you know him and we all know him, but I think one of the best country songs that's been out in the last 10 years is Tyler Farr, you know, Guy Walks in the Bar. I think that was, I was hopeful when that song came out that, man, there's a trend right there. This is going to really, you know, change things. So that's a great song. But, you know, I love Drake, man. I think Drake does great work, and I really enjoy his music. I'm a Jinx guy. You know, Cody cut one of my songs on his last record, and I was a fan way before that. But, you know, that I really appreciate that. I thought that was really cool. But as far as what's on country radio,
do you like Morgan Wallen at all? I have to ask because I find myself hearing a couple of his tunes now to where I'm like, that's got some country in it. The first one he ever put out that he did not write that I thought he did was The Way I Talk. And and then he's got a song about where you're from, about, you know, do you ever think about the boy from East Tennessee? And I can't remember the name of the song, but do you like some of his stuff? Because he's got some popularity right now.
Yeah, he's from Knoxville, right? So, and I've never met him, but once I started working with Jamey, I sort of gravitated off the road a little bit, and things changed a lot. And I'll be honest with you, the last thing I'm going to do is to come on and hate on other people's art. I don't like that to begin with because, you know, what you do with your art is your own business. But they do mix art and business sometimes a little too much, and that can kind of, you know, change things. But when I was writing on Music Row a lot, we were writing country songs, and we would kind of dabble in other things here and there. But it seemed like a lot of my writing started to focus more and more on like drum loops and trying to come up with feels. And I feel like that a lot of times the lyric ended up suffering because of that. And then hip hop got involved a little bit in it, and I'm not knocking it. That's fine if you like that stuff. It just wasn't what I was, accustomed to or used to, and I didn't really know how to write that stuff. So to circle back around to Morgan Wallen, the times that I've heard his songs, I know what I've heard on the radio, and man, you cannot debate that that's not some hooky stuff, man. I mean, that stuff gets stuck in your head, and then you got an argument there is that that's not what music's about in the first place, is having good music and getting it hooked and stuck in your head. So my very limited knowledge of Morgan Wallen is that he's talented, man. He knows how to write a melody, and he knows how to write a groove and a hook. So I give him that, but that's about as far as my knowledge of his music goes.
What if you start adding the female into the equation, Chris Hennessee? You've been on stage with some of the greatest, one of them being Alison Krauss, who could sing a phone book and just make you be like, oh my gosh. And then not to mention when you meet her, she's just so awesome as a person. Who do you like to listen to in the female? Now we all say Dolly is Dolly. Dolly's the best, in my opinion. I mean, we're all trying to find the next Dolly per se, maybe, but I don't know if there'll ever be another one. The way she built her career, the way she wrote songs, she's an amazing talent. But who do you think in the female genre stands the test of time?
Well, man, it kind of all starts and stops with Allison. Really, I mean, once you're on stage with her and you hear her sing, it's like, man, I don't know how to add anybody else into the equation, but. We did some shows in the last couple of years with a gal named Natalie Stovall, and she ended up being in a band with another good friend of mine, Jennifer Wayne, called Runaway June. And I think they're good, man. I enjoy their music. Man, Miranda's good. She does some stuff a lot of times that I'm really impressed with. And the guy that produced her records, Frank Liddell, I've been friends with him for a long time, and he does great records, man. I think they've got a really good combo going there. I'd have to think a little more about the female part of it. But there's a few. But Allison,
oh man,
we've talked about this, but she's played and sung on my last record.
Yes.
Man, what a thrill and joy that was. It was just unbelievable.
She's amazing. You can't argue it. You can't get better. I would put money on that. But you mentioned Frank. You say he makes great records. I got to ask you about this Kentucky artist that he did a record for in 1997. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Chris Knight, I feel, is in those top 2 or 3 that you mentioned Brent Cobb in when it comes to putting a song on paper. Are you a Chris Knight fan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't kept up with him, but back in the day, oh man, that one record that he did that had
It Ain't Easy Being Me and Framed and
There Ought to Be a Town Around Here named for how I feel. That's good stuff right there, man.
Oh, it's a good song.
Frank too, and he was working on that stuff, and it was like, they've got a pretty good thing going there. But I haven't kept up with him through the years though.
All right, my man. I want to talk about this to kind of take us to the end of the line with, and I truly appreciate you coming on. I love what you do. How much does work ethic come into what you have achieved and what you achieved today with Jamey? I was on stage one time and I had the honor of watching you guys rehearse Misery and Gin. And if y'all did it you had to have done it 30 times that day. And you get a quarter of the way done and Jamey would stop and he would talk to the background singers and he would do this. And I was just like, man, this is work. This is professionalism. This is perfection. This is dedication to the art. Okay. How much does that play in what you do and Jamey? Because it's not just talent, right? I know you guys have ungodly talent, but is it nonstop work to get to this point of getting that stage show down the way it is and getting these songs perfected the way that you want them? Or do you guys just go up and wing most of them?
Well, that day in particular, we were not winging it. I know what you're talking about. That was in Reno, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we weren't winging that one. And I think it's because first of all, Misery and Gin's not easy song to play. I mean, that was one of the, we do, White Lightning or something, we don't rehearse that. We just take off and play it because we played it. I've often said that I've spent the last 20 years rehearsing, on stage in front of people. But that day in particular, Misery and Gin's one that if you're not careful with, you can get off in la la land pretty quick on that one. But to answer your question, 90% of the time we just go out there and hit it. Like we just go out there and like it's kind of like you're a baseball guy. So when you're in high school, you get coached heavily. Do this, do this, do this. Don't do this, don't do this. You get in college and you get moderately coached. You should know this. You should know this. You get in the big leagues, and if you don't know it, you ain't there in the first place. So those guys go out and they play ball. They don't, they'll take some warm-up swings, and they might get a little pointer from the hitting coach or the pitching coach. But for the most part, they go out and just react because they know how to do it. And it's the same thing with this, man. We've played so many times. There's a few times that we might drop the ball, but we're going to pick it up real fast and throw the guy out at second. You know what I mean?
Oh, I like that analogy. Do you
have... I'll always use ball as an analogy because it translates to life so well. I mean, as you well know, you hit, you fail 70% of the time you're in Cooperstown, right? So there's a lot to be said for baseball and how you can translate that into life. So,
yeah, and I'm pretty opinionated on like when I said that you guys are, the best, the Lonesome Song and your guys' stage shows, like. But I also say that baseball players are the best athletes in the world, and people look at me like, "Are you nuts? They can't run like a soccer player, and they can't swim like Phelps, and they can't dunk." And I'm like, dude, if you take the top athletes on all 30 Major League Baseball teams, and you put them in this Olympic style deal where they got to play ping pong and bowling and swim, catch a football, dribble a basketball and shoot it, the baseball players are going to come out because hitting a baseball and fielding a ground ball is some of the hardest things to do in athletics. I'm not saying that I could go into the pool and beat Michael Phelps. By no means would I ever say that. But I could go in there and swim back and forth in a freestyle stroke and do it. And I don't think Michael Phelps can get in the cage and hit a baseball 3 out of 10 times. Not to say that he's not a great athlete. It's just a different animal.
Yeah. I agree, and hey, I want to say this too. Speaking of, you said Olympics. I want to do a little plug here.
Yes,
I've got one that I went to college with, and he has 4 kids, and one of his kids got into gymnastics early. He's a young man named Brody Malone, and Brody got into gymnastics, got better, excelled, ended up at Stanford. He's won the last 2 NCAA national championships, and he is going to be representing the good old US of A in Tokyo here next week. And so you guys look out, go on, watch Brody Malone every chance you get. Brody's a great kid. He's from Georgia. He's a cowboy. He grew up roping. And when they interview him, he's like, "Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am." He's a great kid. He's a great story. So go check it out. And he's a great hunter too, man. This kid can call a turkey in from 2 miles away with a stick.
Oh, well, good luck, Brody, and bring home the gold, brother.
Yeah, man.
We need to take him on a duck hunt when he gets back, Hennessee, and have that little gold medal. I
promise you, he'd get there as fast as he could because he loves it, man. He loves it. But, yeah, y'all check him out. And, hey, man, I want to tell you, too, thank you so much for having me on, taking the time to talk to guys like me and, help them to talk about the stuff that we're working on. And thanks for being a fan of what we do, because we're definitely a fan of what you guys do.
Well, yeah, and humility is a big thing in my life now. And you guys have always exuded that to me, of the way that you have treated us, the way that Wally has treated us. There's just never judgment, and to have the chance to have you on and to have a chance to watch you guys play, I just think that we take so much for granted, Chris Hennessee, and I don't want to take stuff for granted anymore. I've seen you guys live over 20 times. But I also saw Montgomery Gentry live probably 10 times, and I don't ever get to do that again. So I think in life, whether you're close with somebody or whether you're a distant friend or just an acquaintance, or you stood in a meet and greet line and got to meet somebody once, or you have respect for the local janitor at the high school, we take things for granted to where life is precious. And when you have the chance to learn somebody's story and know what they're about, that means everything to me. And I don't care how much money we make. I don't care how big a houses we live in or how many boats we own. I've learned that that's not the important stuff. And I know that that's cliche, and I don't want to be cliche, but man, just having, a friendship with you to be able to text you and go, hey man, this song is killer. I wanted to tell you how much gospel songs hit me. And I'm not from the South or Southeast. I'm not Baptist. I'm baptized Catholic. I grew up in the church. I believe in God. I have a great personal relationship with God. My dad is upstairs with him right now. I talk to those two every single day of my life. But when I heard that song, standing on the deck, cooking wild duck this past weekend, I was like, damn it, man, life is important. And to be able to have friendships and to have conversations, I truly feel, where I'm going to end this, Chris Hennessee, this comment I'm making, we just don't do it enough anymore. We text, we instant message, we get self-gratification out of the weirdest things now. We want to like on a picture, we want to like on a video, we care how many views we get. I want to start not caring about that stuff anymore. Kind of like what Jamey did and said, I'm just going to do my thing. And I want to release. I want to just kind of release and let social media just do its thing and let it go. And I want to get back to talking, and I want to get back to what they say in the South, to visiting. I haven't seen you in a minute, Chris. That's what they say in the South. I haven't seen you in a minute. And I want to get back to seeing folks and talking and conversing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And you're doing that for one with this, but and I guess to naturally come back around to something that we both enjoy and talk about and do a lot. Man, how great is hunting for that? I don't care if you're duck hunting or deer hunting or, whatever it is that you're hunting. I mean, how many times you get out in the woods or get to the hunting lodge and they're like, oh, we don't have Wi-Fi, we don't have cell service. And it's like, perfect. That's the whole point in this. Yeah. And I got kids. I got 2 boys now, and we hunt all the time. And that's exactly the perfect time to live out what we're saying right there, is to get out in the woods and to eliminate all of those distractions and things like that. And I'll also say this too, you were talking about faith and talking about gospel songs. I wrote that song 4 years ago, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, and it makes more sense now today than it did then. The message in it, and basically the message in it is exactly what it is. We need more gospel songs. We need, we need more love. And there's no question about that. But I think misguided love can be a little tricky too. So there's 4 books that I would recommend if you really want to learn a lot or everything you need to know about love. And it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the 4 books that I recommend reading if you want to understand love. And that's what it's about, So I appreciate you saying that about that song. I'm glad that it hit you.
When do you think you will start playing it with Jamey? That's got to be one that would be one of those last 2 or 3 songs in a set that would make the crowd be like, now I'm going out of here. I know Jamey's got spirit. I know Jamey feels it. Like, I hope y'all start playing that one.
Yeah, he did. Actually, when I made that record, there was a couple of nights during his set that he said, hey, I forgot about this earlier when you asked about it, but he said, hey, there's a song I want Chris to play. So, I played it during his set. We haven't done that in a long time, but yeah, you're right, because he does the gospel medley at the end. It would fit in there pretty good. But I'll let Wally work on that. I
love Wally. I love Wally. Wally, if you're listening, I love you, brother. I miss you. I had some good times with him. I can't wait to see it. I'm going to be at a show in December. I really wanted to get out to one of those Whiskey Myers shows. Good night. The crowds were amazing, weren't they?
Hey man, I'm such a huge fan. I got to tell you, those guys were great. They're good dudes. We had such a great time, man. And Cody Cannon, that we talked about earlier, he's a big hunter, and he was just telling me he's going on an elk hunt. I guess I don't remember when he said, but it's coming up pretty soon. He's excited about that. But they're great guys. Yeah, everybody should check them out.
Yeah, one of my friends that builds, I don't know if you've seen the guns he built for Jamey, but I had some shotguns done for Jamey with his logo on them.
I've shot a pheasant with them with those guns that Jamey had. Yeah, absolutely.
I need to get you one. I'll talk with you about that in a little bit. But Rob Roberts owns that company in Arkansas, and he builds those. And he built one. He just built one for Cody. And Rob was in Little Rock, and he watched your guys' show. He came backstage, and I don't know if you got to meet him. He was with Jamey, and he got to say hi to Cody and the band. But that was, Rob Roberts came to the Little Rock show to say hello to y'all.
Those are great guns. We go to, as you probably know, we go to South Dakota every year and hunt pheasant and Jamey, and it goes up there, and he takes an arsenal of shotguns up there. So I got to use a couple of those, the 20 and the 12, and they were great. I love them, man.
Yeah, they're smoke shows. I love them too. Well, man, I appreciate you. I love your music. I love what you're doing. I can't wait to see y'all live again, and just keep doing it, man. The world needs it. I don't know how many times I listen to the songs that you're a part of, but I love them, and they mean the world to me. And every time I hear them, I find myself wanting to better myself. And I think that that's what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to inspire us and get us to a place where we need to be. And I appreciate you doing what you do, brother.
And back at you. I appreciate you talking with me, and let's do it again soon, man. Let's go hunting.
Well, trust me, we are. I've been talking to Wally about that Reno show in December, and y'all might stay a day or two after, and I'm going to line it up. So I'll get the details, and hopefully we can make it happen.
All right, man. That sounds good. I really appreciate you.
It's Chris Hennessee. When does the official album release? I know we can get 2 songs right now. Is there an official release date?
Okay, so I'm still trying to figure out all of these, digital releases and that kind of thing, because as we talked about before, as we grew up, you made a record, you put it out, and people hopefully bought it. But we're going to do an EP in the next couple of weeks with 5 songs, and then through the summer, we're going to release it digitally throughout the summer. But if you go on to chrishennessy.com, I have the actual, if you have a CD player, I've got CDs, I can send the whole album out, immediately. So that's the best way to do it if you want to hear the whole thing. But by the end of August, we should have both EPs out and all the music out there. So
what's that? Sorry, that cut off on that one.
Twilight in the South is the name of the full album also. So.
Yeah, and it's going to be awesome. 2 questions. Will you have vinyl?
Yes, because you asked, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen.
Has anybody else asked? Because I would love a vinyl signed by Chris Hennessy.
You were the straw. I've had enough people that asked that I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. But now that you mention it, I'm going to look into it and I'm going to make it happen. So.
Okay, and Weatherman, this is a strong song. This is written by Bo Cephas. It's one of those songs that you just are like, oh, good night. And he sings it unbelievably. Why Weatherman, Chris Hennessy, and where do you get the confidence or the nerve, some people would say, to come with Weatherman? Because you got to bring it to sing Weatherman. Have you always loved this song, and are people going to be wowed by it when you deliver it?
I have, and the answer to that is every record that I do, I don't really have much of a formula, but I know I always want to do a gospel song of some sort on my record, and I always want to do a cover of somebody that I've loved. And if I go back through the years, I've done Charlie Daniels and I've done Leonard Skinner covers, and I always try to do sort of deep cuts. I don't want to just do, hits or whatever, but I even did a Foo Fighters song on the last record. But this one, I've got one cover on it, and it's Weatherman. And the reason that I wanted to do it is because last year, in 2020, you're sitting around, you don't know what's going on, and you can get a little blue and try to figure out. And so I was like, man, I heard that song, and I was like, that's how I feel right now. Just we could use a little good news. We need a good weather report, because it's been raining a lot. So that's the reason I ended up with that one.
Did you ever get a chance to tell Hank you were doing it, or ask Hank? I know you've been around Bo Cephas, but do you go through him and get his blessing to do this, or do you just go for it?
You just cut it. I mean, it's kind of funny if you're going to grow up being a Hank Jr. fan and then you get into music and you're a Bo Cephas guy. You think, well, what would Bo Cephas do? Well, what would he do?
Just cut it.
Just cut it. And I've gotten to know Sam, his son, a little bit, and I did it after, but I wrote a song that's on Sam's new record too. You got to check it out. Sam Williams, he's got a record coming out in the next couple of months too. So. but yeah, I just cut it. I figured surely he would appreciate somebody cutting his songs, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I have a request for your next cover for your next album. I would like to hear you do the Gibb Brothers, "How Deep Is Your Love" from the Bee Gees.
Hey, that's a challenge. That's a good challenge. I accept the challenge.
I'd like to hear you do it live one night around Hunting Camp Campfire and just hear you. I'm gonna
listen to it and see if there's some way you want to make it your own.
Oh, yeah.
Know? Like Weatherman doesn't sound like the Hank version, but "How Deep Is Your Love"? That's a pretty good challenge.
That's a very big challenge. I don't know if you could get that high, that voice that they get on the
guitar on it, and we'd really make a good thing out of that.
All right, I'll be expecting it. I can't wait.
Okay, I may have got myself into something I can't get out.
Yep.
I don't know.
"How Deep Is Your Love" and some vinyls.
Yeah. All right.
We heard it here. That's been an unbelievable episode. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris Hennessee. You guys check him out online at Chris Hennessee, or is there music on there? Where is it at? ChrisHennessee.com?
Yeah, ChrisHennessee.com will take you everywhere you need to go.
Get his new album, Twilight in the South. I like the Blacktop song too. That's my kind of song because I'm on the road a bunch. I like it. Congrats, my brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man. We'll see you soon.
Y'all check out Chris Hennessee. Look for Jamey Johnson on the road right now. He'll be back on tour. I know he's touring pretty much the rest of the year, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Heck, you're at the end of the year, right? We'll see you in December. So
I'm hoping to get to another show before then. I usually go out with a song on this podcast, Chris. I don't know if you've heard an ending, but we usually go out with one written by Leith Lofton and Drake White, and they've both performed it, but we use Leith's version of "What You Gonna Do When the Money's All Gone." It's a great song. Can we go out with "Twilight in the South" to end our conversation?
Do it. I love it. Absolutely.
Tom, Jake, hit that button. This is "Twilight in the South" by the one and only Chris Hennessee. Thank you all listening to another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody, brought to you again by Jack Daniel's Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey. Enjoy it responsibly. Never ever allow underage drinking. Thank you all so much. Peace.
Twilight in the South. Way down around where Tennessee turns in.